new governor has just taken over at the Reserve Bank at a time when growth has slowed to a shocking 5.4% in the second quarter and inflation is close to 6%. Many banking regulation reforms like the expected loss provisioning and higher liquidity cover for unstable deposits remain in the draft stage. Coming as the new governor does from the finance ministry, offshore forex markets are penciling in even a pre-policy rate cut. So what are the immediate and medium-term tasks before the new governor? I have an elite panel to discuss that. G Mahalingam, former Executive Director, Reserve Bank and former SEBI whole-time member. Dinesh Khara, former Chairman, State Bank of India. Neeraj, Gambhir, Group Executive and Head of Treasury, Markets and Wholesale Banking at Axis Bank. And Sakshi Gupta, Senior Economist at HDFC Bank. Gentlemen, and Sakshi, thank you very much indeed for your time. Well, Neeraj, I'm going to start with you immediately because I got a call on Monday night from Singapore asking, is there a pre-policy cut? Because, you know, the Revenue Secretary has been chosen. Has the market quietened down, or are there still expectations of a pre-February cut?
I think individuals may have their own views, but if I look at the aggregate market view, which is reflected in how the bond yields have moved and how the swap rates have moved, they barely budged. Okay. The bond yields are pretty much at the same level where they were before the announcement. Swap rates are down a tad, but not as much. So I think the market as a whole is not expecting anything pre-policy in February. There is a wide section of market out there which believes that February rate cut is a live possibility, and probably with the new governor in charge, maybe we'll have a new deputy governor as well who's going to be in charge of monetary policy. We could have a situation where we could possibly see a February rate cut, but that also to some extent depends upon what data on inflation and growth we see from now until February. I think the expectations on inflation are that it will come down from the December highs, and we would like to see some more high-frequency data on growth to see that the expenditure that the government is doing and there is some normalization on the demand side, etc. So I think I would not expect the new governor to act in a haste at this point in time, given the way the position, the situation has been laid out by the previous governor. I do expect that the chances are there for a Feb rate cut, but I think it will depend a little bit more on the data as it shows up.
To be fair, people were expecting a rate cut even if Mr. Das was continued, because the expectation is that, growth needs a prop and inflation is at least the delta is expected to decline. But, Mr. Mahalingam, the more important thing, and you have seen many cycles here, how do finance ministry officials integrate into the Reserve Bank mold of thinking? Does the finance ministry change the Reserve Bank, or does Reserve Bank mold the finance ministry entrant?
Thanks a lot, Latha, for this invitation to participate in this panel. There's a very interesting question that you have raised. Invariably, the officials from the Ministry of Finance, they come to RBI as the governor. And at that precise point of time, if there are differences of opinion between the RBI and the government on certain issues, certainly the finance ministry officials will come with that government views, carrying the government views with them. So there is going to be a huge responsibility on the shoulders of the new governor to convince the internal bureaucracy in RBI about the change of narrative that has to come about. Now, at the same time, the RBI internal bureaucracy is also something which is given to a lot of data crunching, a lot of fact analysis, a lot of interpretations, and arriving at the policy on the basis of the economic compulsions rather than any other compulsions taking precedence. So I would say, clearly, those kinds of compulsions would have forced the Das regime, Shaktikant Das regime, to give a little more precedence to inflation compared to growth. So I have a feeling right now, that maybe the new governor is stepping into the portals of RBI with growth getting a little more precedence over the inflation. But let's also, look at the point of entry of the new governor here. He is entering at a point where there is a relative calm. Much less turmoil compared to whatever many other previous governors have entered in. So to that extent, I would say the new governor is certainly going to face an easier task. But like you are talking about the tussle between the RBI internal bureaucracy and the government, in Invariably, in this tussle, the RBI governor wins initially.
Okay.
That is because he knows that this is what has to be done. This is top in the priority. So obviously, the RBI internal bureaucracy would have to again do some more data crunching, look at some more fresh data coming, and to adjust the narrative. I mean, there has to be an adjustment of narrative if there is going to be a tremendous change in the policy. That means growth over inflation over growth is going to change as growth over inflation. Obviously, the narrative would have to undergo a tremendous amount of change. But at the same time, let me also tell you, the RBI internal bureaucracy doesn't give up that easily. They are going to continue to, they will continue to present the data, they will continue to present the facts, and in general, the mold within RBI is one of conservatism. So they would like to look at financial stability as a very important factor. They would like to look at price stability as an important factor. So given these kinds of backdrops, they would continue to present the data over a period of time so that at least the caution and prudence rules rather than a political economy ruling. The political economy may be given some kind of a place initially, but over a period of time, it's a caution and prudence which rules. So my feeling is the initial battle is lost by the internal bureaucracy, but the internal bureaucracy inches slowly ahead, and then later it presents a very, very realistic, cautious and a prudent picture to the new governor.
Okay, that's amazing candor and amazing insight into what happens in Mint Street building itself. Mr. Khara, I have to take it from what Mr. Mahalingam says. Everybody is concentrating on this big battle of could there have been a rate cut in October itself. But, there is a lot more that the ministry is pushing. And those are the banking regulations, draft regulations on ECL and more importantly on liquidity. Now, let us remember Mr. Malhotra's original position was Department of Financial Services and only then moved to Revenue. So, as a DFS guy, he knows the trouble that banks have been will face. Do you see a postponement of both these, the expected loss rules and more importantly the LCR rules, just more time given?
First of all, thank you, Latha. And of course, what you mentioned, I would say that these were the LCR and the ECL guidelines. They were more of the draft regulations, draft paper for discussion. And of course, RBI has already collated the viewpoint of various stakeholders in the system. I think what you have mentioned in terms of Mr. Malhotra's position, since he is coming from as a Secretary Revenue, the last posting, and prior to that, he was, of course, the Secretary DFS, very closely seen the banking sector and the financial sector overall. And also, apart from that, he has also been the MD and CEO of the REC as well. So I think with that kind of a background, he has got a fair hang in terms of what really is the financial sector, what is the financial sector, and how it can really function well. So I think on that particular context, I'm sure with the kind of responses which have already been given by various stakeholders on the ECL and also LCR guidelines, and also for that matter, even guidelines relating to the provision for the project loans, etc. also. So I think these are some of the things. Probably he will be in a position to strike a better balance. And maybe what Mr. Mahalingam was saying, convincing the internal bureaucracy in RBI is equally important. And I think since he will be striking the balance, he would have seen the picture of the other side. Maybe he can be more convincing in his position while engaging with the internal bureaucracy.
What's your thought, Mr. Mahalingam? This is a huge battle, actually. The interest rate is less of a battle, and it's probably only about a 6-week-old battle. But bankers have been worrying about the higher LCR, higher provisioning for infra projects, project financing that is, and higher provisioning that will come from ECL for a goodish bit. These are vast and deep regulations. You think they get postponed when the man comes from Finance Ministry?
To be very fair to RBI, when you look at LCR, I think RBI is given a fair amount of time. It's going to be implemented only in April of 2025, which is good 4 months away. I mean, from the time it was issued, it was quite long away. Now, even in the LCR, yes, there are some controversial kind of regulations, controversial kind of guidelines. So there is a possibility in my mind that while it may not be junked altogether, there may be a kind of a glide path which could be infused into LCR implementation. So instead of taking it at one go at 5% increase, maybe it would go for a smaller increase. And over a period of time, if the situation warrants that it has to be increased to say from 5 to 6, 6 to 7%, maybe they will go about that increase in a very orderly way rather than slapping an increase of almost about 5% at one go. Now, this is as far as the LCR is concerned. As far as the ECL is concerned, well, I think that's going to be a very tough call for the new governor, exceedingly tough call. Now, this is something where RBI has always been actually rooting for financial stability. They would not like to have the banking sector getting back into a turmoil, which it faced about 5-6 years back. And thankfully, it has been brought to a position of health. But the government has equally strong arguments. When it is a healthy position, do you need to slap these kinds of charges on the banking industry in the form of provisions? So my feeling here is even on ECL, there could be a middle path struck over a period of time. So I'm hoping that over a period of time, perhaps a middle path would be found, which would be comfortable both for the banking sector as well as the regulator.
Okay, I have more to ask both, in fact, all three of you, Neeraj, Mr. Khara and you on the banking reforms, because I think that is the bigger chapter at the moment. But let me get Sakshi in, since interest rates is a talking point. Sakshi, the early numbers we are getting on the current quarter are not encouraging at all. The Godrej consumer numbers are giving the feeling that urban consumption is still struggling. Unsecured loans in so many of the banks has shown pain already. At least 3 or 4 banks have shown. So growth seems to need a prop. What's your sense the RBI will do in terms of rates?
Right, Latha, I agree with you on the growth front. I think the task ahead for the governor really now would be to, while working within the confines of this inflation, targeting framework that India has, to kind of now start looking at growth and supporting growth. While there's been a lot of talk that the second half of this year might be slightly better than the first half, but the fact of the matter is that if we are looking at sustaining growth anywhere between 6.5% for the next 4 to 6 quarters, our real policy rate is too restrictive at, the current stage at 2.5%. So there, the challenge really will be to kind of manage inflation while, starting to cut rates and bring them down, closer to 5.75 by the end of this year. That's my sense if we want to kind of achieve, or maintain growth between this 6.5%.
The other big issue is that we are going to miss Michael Patra as well. It is going to be a new MPC. That question and also more questions on the Forex. The new governor may also face, we just had our panel saying that he is coming in a calm period. Who knows, the calm may last only till Jan 20th and we may have a turbulent world. All those questions after the break to my panel.